I think this project might be done. Join me today as we go over the final steps of design and calibration for the budget open source SV08 toolchanger. It's taken way longer than I expected, but I think finally we're near the end of our journey. With special thanks once again to the support and collaboration of the team from DraftShift, the next installment in this build log is here for your consideration. So let's jump in and start tying off some loose ends. Let's finish off the filament runout sensors that have been sitting there doing nothing since part 5 when I designed the spool rack. They just need wiring to our bird's nest hub, but unfortunately here's where we have a little compromise. The Big3Tech Smart Filament Sensor version 2.0 can detect filament in two ways. Firstly, a simple switch to detect if the filament has run out because it's not present, and then secondly, it has an encoder to detect the filament moving through the sensor, and that's how it can tell if there's clogs or tangles. Because of this, the wiring needs positive, ground, and then 2 data pins. And if we look at the pinout for the bird's nest, we can see we have our positive, ground, and a data pin per tool, and then between the thermistor and NeoPixel ports, we have 6 extra data pins, making 12 in total. So it looks like for 6 tools, we have our 12 required data pins, but we don't. And that's because, according to Ezik, the creator, the 2 NeoPixel ports have a one-way component that prevent them from being used as an input. So that's 10 data inputs, which means for a 5-tool build, you could use the full functionality of the SFS, but for a 6-tool build like mine, you're going to come up short. So I'm going to ignore the green encoder pin and only run the blue switch pin. Of course, others can do it differently. Here's a glimpse of my wiring between the smart filament sensor and the bird's nest. And here's how I got there. On one side of the supplied loom, we have a 4-pin connector that goes into the sensor, and on the other side we have 2 3-pin connectors but with only 2 wires in each. On the twin 3-pin sides, we need to use a pick tool to de-pin everything except the black wire. And then on the 4-pin side, we're going to remove only the green wire and then separate it from the rest. Again, this is optional and only suits if you're wiring up the switch and not the encoder as well. If you were running only the encoder, you would remove the blue wire instead. If you're running 5 tools or less and want to run the switch and the encoder, then don't remove anything. On the 3-pin end, we'll now take the blue and the red and reinsert them into the connector housing to match the wiring diagram. And that is the simplest way to wire up these sensors, but most definitely not the only option. After you plug in the 4-pin end, there's already provisions for cable ties to keep the loom tidy, and as supplied, the looms will be way too long for the space provided. So for the tidiest results, you would cut and then re-crimp the connector so each of these looms was just long enough to reach the bird's nest. Of course, early on I tested this, and you should have a red light with no filament inserted, and querying the sensor will tell you filament not detected. Inserting the filament will turn on a bright blue LED, and sending the same query again in the console will now tell us that filament is detected. Apart from shortening those wires, that's one loose end finally tied up. And that brings us onto another area needing iteration, my umbilical cables, which had sagged badly since they were first installed. On my first version, I was using piano wire as a support for these, but over time at least, the weight of the cable had proven to be too much. So, at the advice of the DraftShift team, I ordered some of these flat springs from AliExpress, which are exceedingly cheap. And the great news is that one of these springs is enough to do 2 tools. We unspool it, find the middle, and then get some hefty shears before making a cut, and don't worry, this doesn't need to be exactly halfway. To facilitate this, I needed to update my CAD, and I was inspired by this mod by NemiDG. Not so much the plate at the base, but more the design of these TPU pieces that tie everything together. These are the final versions, and there were many iterations, but we have a modified clamp for the flat spring to run down the middle, and then the other side of that has a guide with cable tie slots to hold everything snug. We have 2 different TPU guides depending on the section of the umbilical, and then a modified part at the top of each tool where the loose end of the flat spring connects. This updated system requires 5 of one piece, 4 of the other, and then 1 of everything else, with 2 threaded inserts melted in. Our fitment preparation starts at the tool end, and just like the piano wire version, the printed piece wedges underneath the wire clamp using the original M3 screws. Here's a clearer view to show you what I mean. Now we can start to prep from the bird's nest end, and we straighten the last little section of the spring and feed it through the little gap in our little clamp. A pair of M3 by 8mm bolts then holds these 2 parts together. Our next super important step is to take care of the bit of spring that we don't want to rub through and damage our wires. You can either cut it off really flush or bend it back on itself just above the bolts so it won't rub on any of the wires nearby. Eventually, this piece is going to be cable tied to the base of our loom, but we don't know exactly where to set that distance yet, so don't cable tie it yet. This next section is made a lot easier if you've got some high quality shears and can take the sharp corners off the other end of the flat spring. I'd also recommend for each of the TPU parts to take a flathead screwdriver and make sure there's no stringing obstructing it. That'll make it much easier to feed on each TPU segment in position. I'm not gonna lie, this part is laborious, but eventually you'll have all of the TPU elements in place. They go on the outside of the curve, and we have the smaller ones first, followed by the ones with 2 holes. We're now gonna add the loom to the TPU parts loosely, squeezing the TPU parts open to get the loom through the provided hole. We can now plug the cable into the bird's nest and pull it taut through the printed part, and then secure the two together with a small cable tie. At this stage, you'll find that the flat spring is purposely too long for the tool, and we're going to cut it down to an exact match. Remember that you can always cut off more if it's too long, but once you cut it too short, you can't get it back. So take your time and creep up to the correct length. The printed part has a tapered opening to guide the spring, and it's designed that it will just slide in and not need any screws to retain it. At most, you'll need some smooth pliers to help push it in just a little bit further. After I installed my first one of these, it seemed clear that things had improved a lot, and with all of them in place, things are looking even better. So far, so good. This part of the video is very short compared to how long it took in real life, because there were many iterations, and that meant a lot of uninstalling and reinstalling new parts. And I'm probably still going to tweak the TPU parts a little more to make them more streamlined. Sometimes you've got to take a step backwards or maybe sideways to keep moving forwards, but that does mean that we're finally up to something new. In part 7, I did my first toolchanger print, and it was out of alignment. And by that, I mean X, Y, and Z were clearly in different spaces for the two colors, meaning they didn't quite fit together. And that brings us to the main topic of this installment, automatically calibrating the offset between each tool. And calibration is needed because there's little variations between each tool and the shuttle as you put everything together, including the printed parts, assembly, and also the hardware. And as you can see from the wiki, there's multiple ways to do this. For instance, a camera-assisted version, such as the CXC from Ember Prototypes. But remember, my philosophy for this build is to make it as cheap as possible. So instead, we are going for the Sexball probe. This is simply a micro switch with a shaft and ball on top, so the nozzle can trigger it when coming in from the sides or a slight angle. The operation ends up being very similar to the system used on the Prusa XL. On this page, which I will link in the description, we have the links we need to order the parts off AliExpress, and you'll easily get all of these for under $5. One word of caution, some of the shafts might have little burrs on them that will prevent the mechanism from moving as smoothly as it could, as you're seeing here, so inspect and rectify as necessary. That brings me onto my process of designing a mount for the SV08, and Voron users mount the probe at the front next to the bed, but the SV08 is missing this 2020 extrusion, and I soon discovered that even with the ball removed, that the rest of the probe will still sit up too high and interfere with the tool at the front of the bed. Therefore, the SV08 needed this mounted at the back in a removable custom system, and what you're seeing here is close to the final version of what I've ended up with. At the rear right of the bed, we already have a load cell mechanism that we no longer need, but we're going to use the wiring that goes to it. Using a multimeter, I identified which was the positive pin out of the 3. This is the pin the red probe is on when measuring 5 volts. I then used a pick to de-pin this from the connector, and covered it over with some red heat shrink as we no longer need it for the Sexball. That leaves 2 black wires to connect to the new probe, and it doesn't matter in which order they connect. These need to be de-pinned from the JST housing and plugged into the 2-pin JST housing that came with the Sexball. Again, polarity does not matter at all here, just plug them in and make sure they're secure. I did my early testing running queries from the console, but for your convenience I've added a function that can be uncommented in the printer's config with the correct pin already set up, so that a message will appear on the touchscreen every time the probe is pressed or released, so you can quickly and easily verify your wiring. As for the physical mounting, my system has 2 printed parts that utilize leftover magnets, bushings and pins from the toolchanger system, with the base section getting the sleeves, and using the factory M3 bolts to fix in position just behind the bed where the old load cell and nozzle scrubber used to be. The upper half also gets magnets, but also uses M3 by 8mm bolts with some leftover pins, which should make for a very tight and wiggle-free junction. As always, check the polarity of the magnets between the two halves so you're attracting rather than repulsing. The upper piece also connects to the actual probe base using a pair of M3 by 8mm bolts. Early on, you should do a test fitment and make sure that there's no room for wobble on the system. If required, I have some printable shims that go between the probe and the mount to push it lower to the bed and remove the play. When you want to use the Sexball, the easiest thing to do is to plug in our cable that we prepared earlier. Fit it into position, drop the pin and sphere from the top, and make sure that it's moving freely. But I did also experiment with a different version where the wires were cut and soldered directly to some M3 washers, which slid underneath the magnets on both sides, thus making the electrical connection for the switch through the magnets, so the cable never needed to be manually plugged in. But after a lot of mucking about, this turned out to be quite unreliable, leading to repeatable errors, meaning I would not recommend it. With our mounting and wiring now sorted, we can switch our attention to the firmware. My first job was to find the XYZ coordinates of the probe through a series of manual movements to get the nozzle directly above. Once I had confirmed this position, I entered the coordinates into the calibrate offsets configuration file and also entered the correct pin which I had tested earlier. I then went into the main printer config and included the two relevant files. The second file is read-only and doesn't need any editing. In essence, it holds the macros that complete the tool offset calibration. This process is quite straightforward. We need to remove the probe before we home, then run quad gantry leveling, and then from our macros, locate the one that says calibrate one offset, clicking the drop down and entering the tool that we want to calibrate for. The sequence always starts with tool 0 that has a base offset of 000. After a nozzle scrub, measurements begin, and what it's doing at the start is trying to find out where the probe is in relation to tool 0. And just like the Prusa XL, it comes in from all different angles to determine the exact center spot and measure a baseline. With this done, tool 0 is returned to the rack and tool 1 is picked up instead, before a nozzle scrub on the cleaner at the front and the differences in offset measured on the Sexball in the same way. At the end of the test, the console will spit out the offsets for that particular tool. So we can then edit the configuration file for that tool, scroll down to find the G-code offset section, enter the measured values, and then save and restart the firmware. There's also a macro to do every tool one after each other, but I was happy to be patient and run each tool one at a time. Now is a great time to run the same calibration test that I ran in the last part. Mid-print, I heard some bumping, and when a tool change occurred, I noticed some blobbing was depositing itself on the model, which is less than ideal. There was also some other clumps that had fallen onto the bed, so I resliced the model with a prime tower like you would on any other tool changer printer. There's some other issues here because I've done 0 to tune anything in the slicer, but we can see a big difference between the original print, where the two first layers did not match at all, and the reprint after the offset calibration, where everything is matched up quite nicely, apart from the blobs which I think I'll be able to tune out. We have this weird pattern on the top layers that I'm hoping some flow rate and pressure advanced tuning will eliminate. Let's finish with our updated pricing, and as far as I know, this should pretty much be final. I've upped the prices for filament, considering we now have some parts to print from TPU, and I've added in US $5 for the Sexball probe parts, which gives us a final price of comfortably under half that of a 5-tool Prusa XL. Now clearly, these two aren't directly comparable because the SV08 is much more of a project and a lot more hands-on. And even though the fully assembled XL still needs some assembly and calibration from the user, it's a lot more straightforward and automated than what you're seeing in this series. For those looking for a fun and relatively affordable tool changer project, I'm hoping this Sovol SV08 series might still be for you. As I said at the start, I think we're more or less finished. There's still some finessing to do, some setting up of the slicer, some tuning, things like that, but I should be able to start documenting. And I have tried to create these videos in a way that will go nicely with written build instructions. Thanks again to the DraftShift team for all of their help, and thank you, the viewer, for being so patient as this series plodded along. Until next time, happy tool changer, 3D printing. G'day, it's Michael again. If you liked the video, then please click like. If you want to see more content like this in future, click subscribe and make sure you click on the bell to receive every notification. If you really want to support the channel and see exclusive content, become a patron. Visit my Patreon page. See you next time.